Fellow travelers, friends, welcome to the Dialogues Within. These are dialogues with myself and conversations with my friends. Most important of all, these are honest dialogues steeped in truth. Fellow travelers, my friend Yash went to Cambridge, and when he came back from there, he brought for me a book. The book was Architecture, a philosopher's look at architecture by Paul Guyer. Interesting book. Paul Guyer is not an architect. He's a historian and a philosopher. But then he has interest in architecture. I have a confession to make here, friends, that I'm a dreamer architect. And I look at buildings, houses, cities, life passing by, try to understand the buildings, the aesthetics, the functionality, such things of the buildings. And sometimes when I'm daydreaming, I start planning, buildings, cities, roads, and lose track of time. So it's a passing interest. I'm not an architect, not an engineer. By profession, I've been a policeman, but it's a passing interest. So this book was a perfect gift to me. And I once went to Taj Mahal. And at Taj Mahal, there is a huge doorway from which you enter the main complex, the Darwaza. The guide told me to stop at a particular place. And from there, he said, look. And what I saw was the dome, the Gumbad. Then the guide told me, take 3 steps forward. I took 3 steps forward, and then the dome with 2 minarets appeared. And then the guide told me, take 3 steps more. And I took 3 steps more, and then the dome with 4 minarets appeared. Taj was then visible in all its resplendent glory. The guide informed me that this 6th step forward is like a lifting of a wheel. The Taj reveals itself, and on a moonlit night, it looks very beautiful. But friends, I was visiting Taj during the forenoon. Maybe someday I can visit on a moonlit night. So talking about architecture, houses, buildings, well, the first home for human beings was the cave. And cave gave human beings protection, security from weather, from wild animals. It also unspooled creativity. In fact, of earlier times, there are cave paintings. So, cave was the first home. But a house or a home is human beings' relationship with nature. Jan Martel, in his book Life of a Pi, speaks about home in a different context, that in a home you bring nature within. So the whole home is a cave, running water is the river, the kitchen is the hearth, and perhaps the lights is an attempt to bring daylight, sunlight into the home. An interesting concept. In architecture, there was an architect by the name of Marcus Vitruvius. He was a Roman in 1st century BC, an artillery and an army man. And he had written the most ancient treatise on architecture, which goes by the name De Architectura. He was also an inventor in the sense that he had invented a machine called the ballista, which was like a catapult. It could throw huge boulders to break a siege in an army operation. Another machine which he had invented was Scorpio, which was again like a catapult. So in this book, the De Architectura, Marcus Vitruvius gives three elements of architecture for a building. The first one he gives is strength. Strength about the material used, and he even speaks about what material to be used for what. Local material to be used or the rocks to be imported, such things. The second aspect he talks about is the functionality of a building. What is the purpose of the building, whether it serves its purpose. And the third aspect which he speaks about is the aesthetics. For aesthetics, he says that parts and whole of the building should be in proportion with each other. And then, you know, a German philosopher, Friedrich von Schelling, has said, architecture is music in space. So, architecture is how we look at space. It is like music and poetry. It is something which cannot be spoken about. It is to be felt. The essence is to be felt. Beautiful, aesthetic buildings trigger emotions. They move you. They make you soar high in the sky. But then buildings talk to us also. How do they talk to us? They talk to us through the design, through the material used, through locations. The play is visual and the language is spatial. And what they speak is very layered. They speak about the people who live in the building or who have lived in the building, who made the building, why it was made, what materials were used, the march of the civilization. These buildings speak in such a manner and one has to connect to them. But then how do you connect to them? There has to be a way of looking at the buildings. Well, yes, there is a three-step way of looking at the building. First is to look at a building as an object. And this is a building alone which you are looking at. What is the building trying to say to you? What emotions it is going to trigger or it is triggering in you when you see it. Like if you go to a fort and you see it first from outside, what emotion does it trigger? Strength, grandeur, hoary tradition, history, valor. So many thoughts would come to your mind when you look at a fort. I'm reminded of Haveli of my grandfather. It was an old Haveli, not very big, medium size, and it stood in the center of the village on a slightly elevated land. And the Haveli had a chowpal in front. Then it had a huge door and rooms on either side. In one room, my grandfather would spend most of his day. In the other room, he would have people visiting him, and his knickknacks were also kept in that room. When you went into the room, inside the room, you could see the history of the man. There were walking sticks of various types. There were photographs, his old tennis rackets. Then, of course, there were, remnants of the huntings which he had done. He was a shikari as well. So, when you go to a building, it triggers an emotion. In this Haveli, When you entered inside, there was a courtyard and there were rooms all around. I'll come to that later. But then from outside, this Haveli gave a feeling of a man and his life behind. Besides this, the second step to look at the building is an object within objects. A building stands in between other buildings. It is connected to them. Sometimes it stands apart. Sometimes it melts to the surroundings. In this case, the Haveli melted into the surroundings. Next to it was a huge farmstead where all the cattle and horses were kept, and the sprawling village around. When you see a building as an object within an object, buildings pull you also. Why does a building pull? Or which buildings pull you? Museums pull you. Libraries pull you. Gurdwaras pull you. Temples pull you. So, buildings have an attractive power. They attract you as well. And the third way of looking at a building is within the building, the inside, the interiors. Like in the Haveli of my grandfather, when you walked in into a courtyard. Courtyard had rooms all around, and one side there was a granary, rooms full of granary, and a spiral steps going up onto the floors above. And that courtyard was full of activity, humming with activity all day. It reflected the rhythm of the house, the well-being of the house, how the house used to tick, the Haveli used to tick. I have very interesting and distinct memories of my grandmother walking up to the main door, standing there, talking to my grandfather, not entering his room, and grandfather just sitting outside his room, and they both are looking straight ahead and talking to each other. A very, very interesting and a sight of two human beings totally at ease with each other and totally knowing each other and totally comfortable in their surroundings. Buildings play a role in it. Interiors of a building also matter in another way. If you enter a building, a room, it may make you feel grand, it may make you feel diminutive. You may be attracted to the center of the room or to the sides of the room. There is a certain energy. It's said that if a high ceilinged room has, say, 10 odd people formally sitting around a table, the general conclusion which intuitively comes is that they are talking something serious, talking about something intellectual or serious, such things. Even in apartments, there is an arrangement, the logic to the building, the flow of the building. Some apartments we like, some we don't like. But that's mainly because we have connected to the logic of the building, so liked it, energy of the building, so liked it. But friends, modern life is surrounded by buildings. In the cities, huge migration is taking place. People are thronging to the cities. And then policies, government policies impact how you live in a building and what is your experience in it. I'll give an example here that when you are, say, junior in service or junior in age, you live in smaller apartments. And when you grow senior, you live in bigger houses. When I was a junior officer in the government, I used to live in a small apartment which had a small balcony. My children had no place to run around or go. I had to go with them to a park to play. And when I became a senior officer, I had a huge house with a garden, but no children. Children had gone out to study. So the experience of the house changes. The policy, if I am given a chance, I would like to reverse this policy. Let's give bigger houses to junior officers so that the children can play around, create memories, happy memories. And as senior officer, you hardly need a house that big as is given to you. I'm reminded of a poem here. It's in Hindi. इस विश्व में के कोने में मेरा देश है, देश के कोने में मेरा शहर है, शहर के कोने में मेरा मोहल्ला है, मोहल्ले के कोने में मेरा घर है, घर के कोने में मेरा कमरा है, कमरे के कोने में मेरी कुर्सी है, जहाँ मैं काफ़ी समय बिताता हूँ. मेरी ज़िंदगी कोने का कोना है. So when you are senior, you are living hardly in the whole house. You are living in one corner of the house. And friends, in future, artificial intelligence will design buildings. They'll do a very good job of it. They'll make beautiful buildings. Strong, strength, functional, aesthetic also. There will be no time and cost overruns. Maybe the local economy will also flourish because they might make use of local material. But one thing is that the architect's voice or the owner's voice, who owns the building or has designed the building, would these buildings be able to communicate that? Well, friends, let me know which is your favorite building from functional point of view and aesthetic point of view. Smiles and cheers to you. Peace and joy to you.